What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here, the Side Guys Football Forum. I'm one of your co-hosts on the side, joined as always by my good friend, my good buddy, the other half of the Side Guys, we're Tad the Side. And Tad, we are answering questions from the people. We're answering questions from, people interacting with us on social media, people from our LAFB Slack group, text messages from my friends. I don't know if you got any interaction from your friends, but just like we're widespread as far as the questions they were answering. This is a FAQ episode, a frequently asked questions episode, just about everything fantasy football. We're going super specific with some people. We're going super broad with other people, but yeah, I mean, this is the whole reason why we sort of do this podcast is we want to give people answers to questions that they may have when it comes to, drafting, planning their strategies, waiver wire, start, sit, trade. I mean, whatever it is, we're here to help you with all of that. So, I mean, you see their ticker coming right down below. Interact with us throughout the season as well. You got me at I'm the Side 23, Tad's 94. Got the show handle at the Side Guys, and of course on Instagram at the Side Guys as well. But that is the purpose of today's episode, Tad. I don't want to take too much time longer, but yeah, this should be a lot of fun.
I know you weren't doing this on purpose, but you kind of sound like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises there. Like, we're answering the questions from you, the people. That was a great Bane impression, by the way. We need to turn that into a character.
Please don't.
Expect one of us in the wreckage, brother. That's dead on. You gotta give me credit. That is great.
Not good. It is not good at all.
You thought you were born in the shadows. What's the line? I don't even remember.
See, you don't even know the line. This is never going to be a character. But yeah, this should be a lot of fun.
Adopted the shadows.
This should be a lot of fun. We're answering a lot of questions from people that we got interactions from up here. But guys, I mean, we're super excited. Fantasy football season's right around the corner. The NFL season's right around the corner. And that gives us a great transition to interact with to bring up our great sponsors at Underdog Fantasy. Because I mean, with Underdog Fantasy, you could do some sports betting. You could do some fantasy football action as well. Me and Tad like the sports betting aspect with it. Whatever sports you're comfortable betting with. We already talked about the NFL season being right around the corner. The college football season is right around the corner. The WNBA season started last week. You got that last couple of months with that. You got the last couple of months of the MLB season. October, we'll have the NBA season. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you could be betting on. Whatever you're comfortable with, all you have to make is 2 to 8 different prop bet picks. The more picks you make, the more potential money you can win. So, I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, make a pick there, and you could potentially win some money this fall. Guys, they want to get you into the action. They shared a promo code that we're going to share with you. That promo code is DESAI, DESAI. You could double up on your initial deposit of $10 or more, up to $500, courtesy of our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. So, I mean, if you were to put in that max amount, $500 with our promo code DESAI, you can get that match dollar for dollar and bet with up to $1,000 on their betting platform. You can use the website, very easy to use website. You can use the apps both on Apple and Android devices, very easy to use on there as well. Whatever you're comfortable with, get in the action. A lot of fun to get into some, easy sports betting action. It's really fun. So once again, that promo code is DESAI, DESAI. Double up on your initial deposit of $10 or more, up to $500, courtesy of our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. So, Tad, you ready to get into some question and answers here?
Let's do it.
My Lord, this is so bad. So our first set of questions will come from a friend of ours in LAFB Slack. He's a co-host of LA Podfidential. Thaddeus Klein shares a name with our co-host here, Tad. And so, yeah, his first question here is, honestly, it's something that I encounter a lot in my leagues as well. Probably not the same in yours, but why are there not as many trades in fantasy leagues? So, I mean, Tad, you are a trade aficionado. So, I mean, I'll let you answer this question, even though you like to trade with anybody and everybody if they're willing to. So.
Yeah. Well, that's funny you should mention that of like, well, it's probably not true in yours that there are a lot of trades. The only reason that statement is true is because of me. Without me, there would be maybe 2 or 3 trades. And it's just, you're kind of asking, this isn't so much a fantasy football question as it is like a human psychology question.
That's more of what it is. Exactly.
And I think honestly, it just goes down to the fear of the unknown of you are so confident in your own mindsets of like, I drafted well, I did my research back in August, and people are just afraid to adapt to the season. And I think that's why, honestly, there's no real good way to get research on this, but I'd be willing to bet if you looked, most champions at the end of the year pulled off at least one or two major trades, because adapting is just a natural part of fantasy football. So why is there not a lot of trades? Frankly, people are scared. They're scared to make the big move. And that's what we were talking about in our Fantasy 101 episode is you can't offer trade. Again, I'm trying to think of a PC way to put this. You can't offer a horrible one-sided trade. For those of you who are like, what's the non-PC way of saying that? So I think that's the whole thing is like, you can't be afraid. Even if you get a rejection that first time, it's not like a girl where, okay, she said no, I respect the no. You don't need to respect the no in fantasy football. Go ahead and, contact that person. Be like, okay, what went wrong? Where was the hang up? Because a lot of times you'll find out. So for example, I tried to trade Joe Burrow and I'm trying to remember some running back and I traded off my roster. And I was like, okay, I think that's a really good trade. And they rejected it outright. I was like, what went wrong? And he didn't view Joe Burrow as a QB1. In hindsight, good call by him since Joe Burrow mishapped the season. But that is not what I expected. So you got to get that additional context. So why are people afraid of trading? Because they don't feel comfortable with it. But there's a way to, kind of overcome that, which is communication. There's nothing more frustrating than when you have a good trade or a trade kind of in the process and just stops dead in its track. Communicate with the other person. Be open. Don't try to, totally dominate them in the trade, because that is the quickest way I found where these negotiations are just over. Where you insult the person and they take that insult very personally. They're like, no, I'm just done with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, exactly like you said earlier, is just a lot of people have confidence in their roster. That's like, okay, I think my roster is just starting slow. So it's like, if they're not ranking a lot of points, they're starting.
Even if it's week 12, if it's week 12, we're just, it's a slow start.
That happens too. Yeah,
we got 5 weeks left. What?
So I think people just feel that's like the guys that they drafted as like potential sleepers. That's like, oh, okay, now this is the child that's like the weaker part of the schedule. What it was like, they're finally going to break out now. So there's not as worried with that. But I think just the biggest thing that you also hit on the point there is that a lot of people are just afraid to communicate as far as the trade. It's like people send a trade and they just reject it. There's no like,
I hate that so much.
As far as like, okay, what did you not like about this offer? Like, did you not want, David Montgomery? Did you not want, Xavier Worthy? It's like, whatever it is, just like, they're not willing to just have that conversation as far as like, what of this trade did you not like? And so that's part of, like you said, we're just like, that's where the trade sort of hit a brick wall, where it's just like, there's not that dialogue of just like, you know what, let's rework this here. So it's like usually all the trades that I make, I don't even send a trade offer. I reach out to that person directly and I'm like, okay, I'm interested in this person. Let's open a dialogue here and see what we can sort of figure out there. And then I usually, figure out like, what are they interested in? And then we sort of put together a loose trade offer through text or Slack or messaging, whatever it is. Then we finally get to a point where it's like, all right, let's go. Then we actually execute the trade offer there. But just like, you start with a conversation, because that's the only way you're going to be able to sort of figure out like, okay, these are the guys he's kind of interested in. These are the guys he's not interested in. So this is the way I could put together the best offer. But just, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't do trades either, is because they don't get that sort of reciprocation as far as like, okay, this sort of worked. Let's sort of readjust it now. It's just like, nope. Okay, move on. That's all it is. So.
Okay, 2 things. One, where the hell did Xavier Worthy come from? He's now your prime trade bait example.
Well, I just think about guys for this year. So that's the first thing that came to my head. Xavier Worthy.
Fair enough. Just curious choice to me. No, and again, I'm definitely reading too much into human psychology here, but that's not a bad strategy of texting them off the bat. But for me, I like sending them, and this is probably me just being too biased towards my own, mindset. Sure. I like sending them a trade offer first.
You make a lot more trades than I do, so yeah.
Well, and here's why. This is what I mean. Where I'm probably projecting myself onto others, but like that dopamine, it's the same thing as when you get like a like on Instagram and you're like, oh, like it's just been scientifically proven when you get likes on social media, there's a dopamine or like the chemicals that send pleasure throughout your body. I get that when I get that email of like trade proposal, I'm like, woo. And so that's why I go for the trade proposal first, because you get that little like, ooh, kind of like initial interest, and that kind of draws them in a little bit more rather than a text of like, oh, I'm interested in this. But honestly, I think we're both on the same boat here of like, just communicate. That's the whole thing. It's like, and that's the most frustrating thing. Not so much with the LAFB guys, to their credit, in our league, they're more willing to talk. My friends, oh my God, if you insult them with one offer, they're not going to talk to you for the rest of the week.
And that's usually what happens as to why there's not trades either. It's just like, yeah, they hit that brick wall. It's like, okay, now you're not getting past it now.
And that's the worst thing is like, I will offer a totally one-sided trade in their favor, but because you insulted them once, they're just like, nope. Like, really? Like, I actually did that as a social experiment last year. And just because I tried to pull something sneaky off, they're just like, no, I don't trust you. So it's just like that trust is very, very key.
All right, let's get to the next question that Thaddeus sent into us. And this is actually pretty interesting. So which is better, PPR or half PPR? So Ted, I think you mentioned on the podcast before that, you are more in favor of the half PPR, that's sort of the standard. Yep. So I actually went through the three major fantasy platforms. I went to Yahoo, I went to ESPN, and I went to Sleeper. And I created a brand new league to see what are the default settings for all of these leagues. I deleted all the leagues afterwards. I just need to see what the settings were.
Still more work than I would have put in.
But I saw that on ESPN and Sleeper, the default is PPR, so a full point per reception. Yahoo was the only one that set the default as half PPR. So I haven't obviously experimented with all the other the fantasy platforms out there. There's a ton out there for sure, like NFL.com and CBS and all those other ones. I didn't experiment that far. I was like, these are the three that I think most people use, and I was like, let me check out what it is. So it seems like, in my eyes, the standard seems to be full PPR. But I mean, let's just answer the question here, Tad. Do you prefer half PPR or full PPR?
All right, we'll both answer at the same time. You ready? On three?
No, our answer is going to be different. That's why.
Whoa, wait, what?
Yeah, I know what. I'm probably pretty sure what your answer is, because that's pretty sure what the setting is for your league. So that's why you're going to favor that.
Okay, well, here's why you're wrong. Is because half PPR is the way to go, because there definitely needs to be some balance there, right? So we actually had this discussion in my league in terms of rule change. Every year we have a week where we debate rule changes. As commissioner, I very much regret making that thing. It was like the most miserable week of my life. But one of those, discussions was a guy, and you'll laugh at this, a member of our league wanted to increase quarterback points from 4 points per passing touchdown to 6 points per passing touchdown. We all immediately disagreed. Why? Because the quarterback is already so overpowered in fantasy football. And I think that I understand the thought process behind PPR, full PPR, because it kind of balances that OP by the quarterback. But I think it shifts the balance a little too much. And it shifts it in the wrong direction, right? So you look at a Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, honestly, in a full PPR league, may finish as the 4th or 5th best wide receiver. Because let's be honest, he doesn't finish usually. I know he killed it last year before people start screaming at me. He usually doesn't finish with the most catches, like either on the team or definitely among the best receivers. But in a PPR league, it offsets that, where you get a Puka Nacua, for example, a name which, by the way, we're just going to come up a little later. So point being is PPR overvalues the wrong receivers in my eyes, where half PPR kind of keeps that, where it offsets the quarterback value, which is necessary, but it does so in a way that keeps the actually good receivers still more valuable. So that's why I value half PPR. For those of you who are like, what the fuck are these two talking about? Half PPR is 0.5 points per catch. Full PPR is 1 point per catch. So basically the receivers that get the most catches tend to actually be more valuable, because if you think about it, if a receiver gets 6 catches a game but doesn't score a touchdown, that's just as valuable as a receiver, I don't know, like Xavier Worthy, for example, who will have 2 catches but could potentially get a long touchdown. I don't think that's fair to make those two equal.
I understand that. I think the way that you look at a half PPR league, it's sort of that hybrid between a full PPR league and then a non-PPR league, which used to be called standard leagues. But it still sort of skews it more towards players that gain yardage and touchdowns as opposed to reception. So
which should be the method.
But it still devalues a lot of those receivers that don't score or get a lot of yards that where it's just like if they're purely receivers or tight ends or running backs, whatever it is that get receptions to sort of just move the chains, it's like it sort of devalues all those players. It's something that we brought up before where it's just like, you look at last year in PPR leagues, Raheem Mostert finished as the 5th best fantasy running back in full PPR leagues. In half PPR leagues, he finished 2nd because he scored 18 touchdowns and he had over 1,000 rushing yards or whatever it is. So it's just like, you see sort of that balance there where it's just like some other running backs will then get more value then because they're getting that full point per reception. So it's like, in case they're not getting the yardage or the touchdown numbers, they can still hold some value as far as getting some of those reception numbers. So this is why I like full PPR more, is because your depth at each position then grows. So it's like that allows you to then pick the waiver wire a little bit better, allows for better trades and things along those lines. Whereas like with half PPR, you're kind of limited where it's like, if you only have some of the top performing players, that's where all your money is going to be coming from as far as like your full points for your fantasy team. Whereas like with full PPR, your depth of like getting a quality player even later off the waiver wire is still pretty high.
Okay, so I know you have it, but so this is a bit of a rhetorical question. Do you have CFP 25?
Of course.
Okay, what difficulty do you play on?
I play on All-American.
Of course you do. So that is my entire point right here, is because nothing in your argument is invalid. I'm saying like everything you said is completely true. However, it's just, that's essentially, there's a reason I'm making this metaphor. By the way, for my students listening, that's a metaphor. We're having a lot of trouble with that. We're working on it. We'll get there. Hopefully. So that's the entire metaphor right there, is like, how difficult do you want fantasy football to be? For myself, I'm going Heisman difficulty. That's why I play CFP 25 on. Be very careful passing the ball on Heisman is a dangerous game. For you, you go All-American. There's nothing wrong with All-American. All-American. I mean, I've got an upset on All-American. I pulled off some great upsets on the opposite hand. Like, it's just how difficult do you want it to be? Because yes, PPR does, like you said, expand the game much more, expand the roster, expand basically everything much more. For me personally, I want that limited scope. I want it to be more difficult. I want it to be a challenge. Not saying that, PPR is not a challenge, because it is. But I think that's where ultimately you fall in this question of just like, do you want a little bit more options available, or do you want to go for the real challenge? All-American, my God.
Fair. Makes good point to me.
Let me guess, your San Jose State Spartans are like 23.
No, I'm not coaching San Jose State yet.
I'm surprised you didn't start with them. Good for you.
All right, Ted, let's get to the last question that Thaddeus submitted to us, and it's another either or, like, which is better. Would you rather prefer to play in a league with DST, so defensive special teams, is all just one unit, or do you prefer the IDP, so an individual defensive players? Well, it's like the same thing that you're building your offensive roster with. You're drafting individual defensive players sort of build your roster there.
DST, defense.
Okay.
100%. Because here's why, and we brought this up in the Fantasy 101 series, which, by the way, you can check out on the LAFB Network YouTube channel. In case you were like, what the hell is IDP? Well, we got that answer for you.
We do.
Here's my issue with IDP is, and again, this is a tip and trick we brought up in that series, is it again, you'll kind of see a running theme with my values here when it comes to fantasy football, is it overvalues the wrong players. If you draft Kenny Moore, I actually said was going to be a good draft pick. If you drafted Jalen Ramsey and, expecting him to be a top tier fantasy corner for you, he's not. Because, as we brought up in the past, he never gets thrown to because he's so damn good. But that's not working for you in fantasy. So the reason I kind of dislike IDP is it misvalues players, right? I picked Micah Parsons as one of my busts for IDP. That tells you how misvalued, how skewed these numbers can get. I don't think that's fair. Also, the numbers get way too high. I like doing math when it comes to fantasy football, but when it comes to that much math where we're reaching numbers in the 400 by the end of the week, I'm not a fan of that. So it's just DST is more simple. It's more straightforward. I think you have the strategy of streaming, which we will bring up in a bit, but for IDP, it's a little too much for me.
See, it's funny because you're bringing up the whole aspect of like the challenge and like the Heisman versus All-American.
It does.
So that's why I like the IDP aspect, because it's like it gives you more customization too, right? Where it's like with the DST, like let's say you lose a key player from your defense. So it's like for your Colts, let's say DeForest Buckner goes out. That could affect your overall.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
Or back in the day when you guys had Darius Leonard and all this guys. So it's like if a key player goes out of your defense, that defense is sort of limited now going the rest of the season, where it's like when you're drafting IDP players, you're not tied to the whole unit. So it's like you can pick and choose the guys that you want the same way that you're doing it with the offensive roster. So it's like I like that customization aspect and that you're not tied to the exact just the team itself. So yeah, that's the way I sort of see it with IDP. So I prefer IDP because you get that full customization on both sides of the ball then. And I do agree with you. It's a different strategy. That's like the guys that you think will be top defensive players for IDP may not necessarily be the same thing with your, in real life, right? So it's like you are valuing a different statistic when it comes to IDP players. But like I said, that's just the added strategy then with fantasy football, especially with defensive players then. So it's like I said, that's where I like that challenge then, where it's just like, the customization aspect and just like, adding full control over your entire roster then.
No, that's fair. And I'll say I'm your take on this, I'm much less against than your take on PPR. Cause like, I hate PPR. I don't like full PPR. I despise. I totally understand the appeal in IDP, but let's keep the CFB 25 metaphor going. It feels to me kind of like the force win. What is it called? Strategy, I guess, or force win option, where you can go to your team schedule and you can be like, TCU versus Kansas. Yeah, we win that one. It just feels like kind of like that, where it's like, wow, how the hell did you pull that off? Well, you didn't see this sneaky little fucker hanging around. It's like some third string corner on the Cincinnati Bengals. You're just like, oh, come on. I had, I don't know, Roquan Smith. And like, how'd you beat me with this third string corner who scored more than him? Well, because that corner sucks, got burned. But because he got burned, he got a lot of tackles. Like, to me, it's like cheating the system almost. So that's why I don't like it. But I do understand the appeal because it is much, much more added strategy for sure.
Exactly. So we appreciate Thaddeus for sending in his questions there. Let's get to the other half of LA Podvidential, the other co-host, good friend of our show here, Chauncey Talese. He sent us a bunch of questions. So a little long one here, but which new coordinator either delights or scares you in terms of fantasy football this year? So I know we always do our new head coaching series. We don't dive as much, or I'd probably say not as much. We don't dive at all into the new coordinators as much. Only comes up when we do our analysis for other fantasy players of other fantasy episodes. So Tad, why don't you answer this question first? Like, who's a new coordinator that either excites you or terrifies you when it comes to fantasy football prospects?
This might be a pick for a later episode, but this also has my pick for a boomer bust team. Like, this team is either going to do really well and people are going to be like, oh, finally, or they're just going to shit the bed and they're that poor franchise. I am fascinated by Zach Robinson, and as the new offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. He is a Sean McVay disciple, former, LA Rams quarterback coach. People, and I say people, including me, I made this prediction last year. We're writing off Matt Stafford. I thought last year was going to be Stafford's last year. I truly thought he was going to struggle, be done. And, it was funny. I was reading an ESPN article a couple weeks ago where they predicted that Stafford would have one more Super Bowl now before he retires.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was just, by the way, that was like a 30-year prediction for the next Hall of Fame classes. If you want to feel old, read that article because you're like, oh,
I read that one. Yeah.
Oh, my God. I felt so old on that. But point being is, I wouldn't say like Robinson is, single-handedly responsible for reviving Stafford's career, but he definitely played a role, hence why he now has this new role in Atlanta. So you put Kirk Cousins, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson all together under a Sean McVay disciple. This is an offense built to thrive in this system if everything goes right. Yes, that's a big if. But I will say the promise is there where I'm like, oh, shit. Like, I know the past couple of weeks I've been like kind of poo-pooing on Drake London and Kyle Pitts. They've both been in my kind of bust or make it or break it candidates. It's going to be very hard to resist that temptation come draft time. So I think that there's a lot of real promise here. Honestly, if you want my guess, I think Bijan Robinson is the biggest benefactor from this. I think he has solidified himself as a first-round running back. Drake London has the most quote-unquote sleeper potential. I know some people won't consider him a sleeper. I do. And Kyle Pitts has the biggest boomer bust. But if he booms, I think in this offense, he's going to do it big time.
Yeah, I think Atlanta is very much one of those teams that's like, if everything goes right, they can
Yeah,
very
exactly.
much be Super Bowl
Yeah.
contenders. But if anything goes wrong, that's like, yeah,
It's
they're
gonna
very
be a
much going
train
to look
wreck.
exactly like what we saw last year. So I was looking around at all the coordinators, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't see there any that really scared me enough. Like, I know a lot of people would sort of talk about Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh, but
No.
Arthur Smith succeeded as an offensive coordinator. So it's like, I'm actually not worried about him being in Pittsburgh. I think they have worries at the quarterback position more than like him running the offense. I think that's a separate issue. But a guy that sort of excites me, and I think this is very much similar to Atlanta, where it's like they could either boom or they could very much bust very quickly, the Washington Commanders. And so I'm excited about Cliff Kingsbury coaching this offense because we talked about Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, when we did our Dan Quinn episode. Go back and check that episode where we go full into this. But just like Cliff Kingsbury, obviously coming from Arizona, where he coached Kyler Murray, they obviously were hooked, sort of like, tied at the ankle or whatever, right, together, where it's just like,
Tight at the hip, man.
handcuffed together. That's the word I was looking for. Handcuffed together, being obviously
Maybe.
hired and drafted together, #1 overall, where it's just like, these built for my offense. And so it's like he has experience with a mobile quarterback that can also throw the ball. That's exactly what is happening now in Washington with Jaden Daniels. So it's like you'd like to think that he learned from his mistakes in Arizona as to why maybe he didn't get the most out of Kyler Murray. He's able to take those learnings and apply it now to Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels comes into the NFL maybe a little bit. This may be a hot take, but I think he's better prepared for the NFL compared to Kyler Murray was. So I think that he's got that advantage on him. I like the weapons around him with Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dodson. They signed Zach Ertz in the offseason, who has familiarity with Cliff Kingsbury. Austin Eckler, obviously. And of course, Brian Robinson Jr. I think a lot of people, when you're talking about sleepers with Drake London, Brian Robinson Jr. is a very good sleeper at the running back position. I'm very high on him for sure. So I think, Cliff Kingsbury in this offense, maybe there'll be a little bit of a rough patch to start out, but I think as things smooth on, he's going to be able to get the most out of this offense, especially with the rookie quarterback there. So Cliff Kingsbury, I think he delights me a little bit.
You'll find very few people who hate Kyler Murray more than me. He went to all the schools I hate the most. As he went to Texas A&M, because fuck A&M, you have not earned anything close to the type of ego that school has. And then, of course, he's transferring. Great, he's no longer A&M. Oh, he's at Oklahoma. Damn it. And then he goes and look, he's good. He was good, but I never thought he would work out in the NFL. And I'm still kind of shocked it seems like people are still kind of like hesitant to call him a bust.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that where people are still just like, oh no, Kyler Murray could still like work? It's like we've seen over the last 3 years, we've seen like zero evidence of this other than like 2 or 3 good plays this season. But anyway, point being is I think that Cliff Kingsbury, for whatever reason, made the wrong call. He put all his chips in on Murray and just did not work. But I'm still a believer in his system, especially because you see this spread-like system kind of, ironically spreading across the NFL. And this is a funny thing about doing a podcast is you do these kind of like knee-jerk reactions where, yes, I'm basing this entirely off week 1 of the NFL preseason, but watching Jaden Daniels fucking nail some of those throws, I was like, I knew it. I knew it. I told all of you. You thought I was crazy because I said that Jaden Daniels had arguably better deep accuracy than Caleb Williams. So even though Caleb Williams, to his credit, also looking fucking awesome.
He's been killing it preseason too.
I'm scared. This actually might be this might be like the 2004 draft class of this generation. With Rivers,
we have to wait and see still.
Roethlisberger, yeah. But bottom line being is like everyone was kind of iffy on the Jaden Daniels thing because he was kind of reeking of a one-year wonder. But after that first week, man, I think he's the real deal. And I completely agree with you. I think like that's exactly why they took him second overall is because they realized if Drake May was in this system, I think he would do fine. But I think Jaden Daniels is going to thrive in this system. I absolutely love that pick. And like we said, they're not names that necessarily jump out at you.
Yeah.
With, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler of like OSE over the hill, Terry McLaurin, who's been kind of just, upper middle tier, like at the top area of the middle tier. But it's just that's not the worst bad offense I've seen. So I think this is actually a very good pick. It's going to be fascinating to watch Washington.
Should be fun. All right, let's get to the next question that Chauncey submitted to us. So, which player or players are overvalued by the fantasy nerd community here? So, Dad, who's a guy that you think just gets overvalued just because he either flash in the pan, just a lot more potential this coming year, or just whatever it is? Just who's a guy that sort of falls into this category?
So let's go back to what you were talking about with Arthur Smith for a second, because he's the sole reason I did not name this player, because I was very tempted to. I was tempted to say Najee Harris. It has been well documented on this podcast. I am not a believer in Najee Harris. I do not like him as a player. I'm sure as a human being, he's a fine person, but as a player, he's terrible. So I was tempted to go with Najee Harris, but I was actually looking at ADP numbers. It seems like people are finally catching on that Najee Harris's, ADP is around the middle to late rounds. So I think Jaylen Warren has probably scared people off. So it's not Najee Harris, but I'm going for a bigger name. And It's not just fantasy nerds who are going to overdraft this player. It's everybody that's going to overdraft this player. Davante Adams.
Wow. Okay.
I think Davante Adams is going to be grossly overrated, overdrafted, whatever you want to say. I'm not going to say I'm avoiding him like the plague. If he's there in the second round, I'll consider him. If he's there in the third round, I'm going for him. But if he's there in the first round, I'm not even looking at him. I'm scanning right past his name. And here's why. It was just recently announced a couple days ago that Gardner Minshew will be the Raiders' week 1 starting quarterback. Good pick. Way better than Aiden O'Connell. And look, Gardner Minshew, thank you. Thank you. When Anthony Richardson went down last year, I thought my Colts season was done, and you kept me going until that very last play where that damn running back let you down. You didn't do anything wrong, Gardner. It's that damn running back whose name we will never mention on this podcast. Don't you dare. Don't you. I will kick you out of this chat right now. I will figure out how to do it because I don't currently know how to do it yet.
Like, can't you even know how to do it? That's a separate thing.
I will figure it out. But bottom line being is Gardner Minshew is the perfect backup / bridge quarterback. However, that does not mean fantasy production. I have proof. You look at last season, Michael Pittman Jr. had a very, very good year with Gardner Minshew as spending the majority of the season with Gardner Minshew as his quarterback. Do you want to get? You know what? Let's do this. Let's play a round of over-under.
Okay.
It's been a while since we played this. This is nice. Over-under, Michael Pittman as the 16th best wide receiver in fantasy football last year. Half PPR.
I'm going to say under.
Under being like 1 to 15, or yeah, I should clarify that. Under being like
under for me means 16 or below.
Okay, I agree. You are incorrect, actually. He finished at 15, which is still pretty impressive. Okay. But now here's the stat that worries me the most is, do you want to guess who not who, but where the next Colts receiver was?
I'm assuming it was probably Josh Downs. And I want
to say
like
Josh Downs. 20s. Okay, that's fair. That would have been my guess as well until I did the research. 46 was Josh Downs last year. So point being is Gardner Minshew, while he does produce on the field, he doesn't necessarily produce for his receivers when it comes to fantasy football. So I think that while Davante Adams will still finish as a top 20 receiver, I'm not going super hot take where that's not a thing. But if Davante Adams finishes 15th, that's going to be a massive disappointment for a lot of people who are likely to draft him in the first round. I think Davante Adams will finish higher than 15th, but I don't think he'll finish much higher. I think it'll be close to 11th or 12th or 13th, something in that range. And for people that are going to be drafting him based off name brand in the first or very early second round, I'm not expecting that type of value from him. So I think that Davante Adams, while still a productive fantasy player, will be overdrafted.
That's fair. I think a lot of people just see the name and they just want to draft him a lot earlier. Yep. I definitely see him as a second round receiver. If you take him at the first round, that's definitely a reach for sure, in my opinion. And you also have to look at the Raiders. They're probably going to be a run first team because of just, the issues at the quarterback with Gardner Minshew, whether they eventually go to Aiden O'Connell as well. Just like, I think they'll lean on the run more, which I don't think will hinder Adams' value that much, but just overall is just like, the chances of them passing more is just obviously less frequent. So yeah, the chances of him finishing in that 10 to 15 range seems a lot more probable than finishing in that 1 to 10 range.
And I think a lot of people are going to draft him as a lock for a top 10 receiver. And that's my whole point is I don't think he's a lock for that.
Yeah. I agree with that. A guy that I brought up before, I think I brought this up a couple episodes ago when we were talking about make it or break it players. Devon Achane. I think a lot of people saw what he did last year, and I think just because he got his amazing stats, great stats whatsoever.
Yep.
But he only got those stats in 3 weeks. If anything, it was actually 1 week in that blowout.
Yeah, he scored like 60 points that game, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think he had over 200 yards in that game as well.
I'm not exaggerating either. He got close to like 50 or 60.
Yeah, so he had insane numbers that 1 week, and then he followed it up with 2 solid weeks after that. But then he got hurt, and then after he came back, he just wasn't the same guy. Like, he saw a little bit just, hesitancy because of the injury, just whatever it was. Just he wasn't as productive as we saw in that 3-week span to start the season. And I said this before because Raheem Mostert was my make it or break it type of player, that if he's healthy, he is going to be the running back 1 in this offense. And so I'm surprised that people are valuing Raheem Mostert so low, but then they're valuing Devon Achane so highly. Like, I mean, probably they're sort of linking to the fact that just like Raheem Mostert stayed healthy. And I brought this up in the episode too. That's like, I think Raheem Mostert like sort of, cashed in all his chips or whatever. It's like, I'm going to stay healthy all this 1 year. And it's like, that's going to come back to bite him this year, probably. And that's what's going to let Devon Achane sort of take that role. But overall, the fact that it's like Devon Achane, I think is going like somewhere like the 20s as far as the position is concerned. And Raheem Mostert is going like all the way like the 40s. Like, it's pretty disparate as far as where these running backs are going. I think I had those numbers off, but just like as far as like the separation between the two Miami running backs, it is pretty severe. So it's like the fact that people are overvaluing Devon Achane over Raheem Mostert, whereas if Raheem Mostert stays healthy, he is the lead back in that offense. So I feel like for people to really think that just Devon Achane is the guy from the get-go, that's a little bit concerning for me.
I'm going to give people a little bit of flashbacks. I've found people tend to conveniently forget. Let's flash back to the Niners like 3 or 4 years ago where, and of course it makes sense because Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator who, of course, then coached up Mike McDaniel, who's now in Miami. Bottom line being is he comes from this branch of, coaches. Before anyone yells at me, yes, I just realized Kyle Shanahan's the coach, not the coordinator. Leave me alone. Bottom line being, he comes from the Shanahan tree.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember this season where, Matt Breida would break out for like 30 points a game. And I'd be like, oh shit. And then I'd pick up Matt Breida up and like, yes. And then fucking Elijah Mitchell would go off for 25 points the very next week. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And I tried to pick him up, but of course, like that didn't work out because the waiver wire didn't work out my way. And I think that's a lot what we're going to see in Miami. Is Achane going to go off? 100%. Is he going to go off consistently? Absolutely not. There are going to be some weeks where he goes off, then Mostert goes off, then he goes off, then Mostert goes off, then he goes off, then Mostert goes off. And it's just going to be a fantasy nightmare. I'm not touching either one of them until I get a clearer idea of how this backfield is going to work. Let that be the risk someone else takes. So I completely agree. I think people are excited too, since he's so young.
I think that's the biggest thing too. Yeah. He's on the right side of 30, whereas Raheem Mostert's already past 30. So I think that's probably a lot of the back.
No, 100. With his injury, he's essentially a rookie. So people are like, ooh, shiny new toy. And it's like, shiny new toy that may sit in the garage.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Tal, let's get to another question here from our good friend Chauncey. Pretty simple here. Who is going to be the 2024 Fantasy Football MVP?
I mean, to me, this is a bit of a risky pick, but I think that there's a little bit of reasoning behind it. Is I think it's going to be Breece Hall, the running back for the New York Jets. I really think Breece Hall is geared for a really big year, and here's why. He finished as running back 12 last year, despite his offense. Oh God, poor Breece Hall. Dealing with Mike White, and who was the other one they trotted out there?
Zach Wilson.
Oh God. No, there's a third one other than him.
I don't remember the third one, but
that tells you all you need to know about this offense is the fact they tried out a third guy and neither one of us remember. He finishes running back 12, despite all that.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm putting my bet on that Aaron Rodgers is healthy-ish. Will he play a full season? I have my doubts, but I don't think he's going to have like a catastrophic season-ending injury again. So if Aaron Rodgers plays a majority of the season, I think you're going to see obviously a much more dynamic offense. You look at this offensive line. They just signed Tyron Smith. They traded for Morgan Moses. This is a revamped offensive line. In case you're yelling at me as Amir did on draft night of like Tyron Smith only plays half a season. Well, that's why they drafted Fashanu out of Penn State. So I think that he will be a perfectly reasonable replacement there. Bottom line being, this offensive line is good. This offense is good. I think that Breece Hall is going to have some more freedom in terms of like they're not just blitzing every play because they know what's coming. And top of that, will he lose rushing attempts because this is a more dynamic offense? Yes. But he's also enough of a receiving threat that I think that his receiving statistics will make up for that difference. So I think Breece Hall is a very sneaky candidate for fantasy MVP.
So Mike White actually didn't play for the Jets last year. It was Zach Wilson,
okay,
Trevor Siemian,
that's the one I was forgetting,
and Tim Boyle started.
Oh God, Tim Boyle, Jesus Christ, Jets fans, I am so sorry, man. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was actually, I love the Breece Hall pick. I think he would have been my pick as well, but I feel a little bit more comfortable with this guy's offense compared to the Jets offense because of, like you said, the whole Aaron Rodgers situation in New York. I go with Bijan Robinson. I think I just feel that, you sort of talked about that boom or bust aspect with the Falcons offense. I'm very much optimistic that it's very much going to boom. And because of that, Bijan Robinson, because there's going to be more of an air attack in this offense, like Kirk Cousins is going to air it out. That's going to open the running lanes for Bijan Robinson. He's a dynamic pass catcher as well. So I think he's just going to be so involved in this offense that he's going to be the fantasy football MVP for me. So, but believe me, Breece Hall is like a very close second. It's going to be one of those two guys.
Yeah, no, and I said this a month or two ago on the podcast where last year I was saying don't draft Bijan Robinson. Don't do it because I knew don't trust Arthur Smith. And lo and behold, it took a while, but I was correct because Bijan Robinson tanked and eventually tanked a lot of people's fantasy teams. It's almost like we should have listened. That's the South Park reference. God, that episode was so good. But anyway, this year I'm doing 180. I think that, Bijan Robinson is perfectly set up to be a great, kind of dual threat running back. It wouldn't shock me. I don't think he's going to have that type of production just because I think the Falcons are going to be passing it a lot. I'm not sure how much with that many targets in that offense. I'm not quite sure if Bijan's going to get enough targets to be fantasy number one, but it also on the same note, it wouldn't shock me if he did. So no, this is a good pick. I just trust Breece Hall a little bit more.
That's fair. Like I said, I think it could be either of those guys. I feel it. But that actually transitions to our next question actually pretty nicely, which is Christian McCaffrey going to be taken number one overall in most fantasy leagues? Because, arguably he was the fantasy MVP from last year. So it's like, why are we discounting Christian McCaffrey this upcoming year and we're valuing guys like Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson more? So, the simple answer is I'm going to say yes. Most likely he's going to be drafted number one overall. I don't see that changing because you look at the offense, there's very little changes to the offense. He's 100% healthy. He said, I know they're holding him out of preseason because of a calf injury, but he said that if this was like a playoff game or this was a regular season game, I'd be playing. It's anything too serious, but just there's no need for Christian McCaffrey to play the preseason. Why are you doing that? So I think just there's a good chance that, I know we mentioned Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, but there's a good chance that Christian McCaffrey could repeat as fantasy MVP. He has the skills. He's in the right offense to sort of see that type of production again. So there's no doubt that he could sort of be that fantasy MVP in 2024 as well. But just, I think, people are going to key in on him a little bit more, obviously, with the whole Ayuk situation, Debo, all that stuff, George Kittle. So it's I think just same thing that you're talking about with Atlanta, where it's just so many mouths to feed that this could be a situation where it's maybe they're not going to feature Christian McCaffrey as more. Maybe they're going to feature some of the other guys a little bit more this season because too many people will key on Christian McCaffrey. So I still think he'll go number one overall, but I think there's other guys that may be in contention for fantasy MVP, obviously.
Yep.
Nothing bad at all, really?
Yep. Yeah, he's going number one. Yep. It's like the oh God, I'm gonna screw this up. But it's the line in The Departed when the guy comes up to Jack Nicholson and he's just like, "Oh, how's your father?" And he just goes, "Oh, he's dying." And Jack Nicholson goes, "We all are. Plan accordingly." It's just yep. Christian McCaffrey's going number one overall. Play accordingly. Yeah, exactly. You just gotta play. Now you brought very many good points. Will he finish at number one overall? That's another interesting question. But that's not the question. The question is he going to go number one overall? And
I guess we'll answer that question if you want.
Yep.
You think he'll still finish at number 1 overall?
Yeah, I think so. Well, because I had my durability concerns last year. And
Sure,
I was like,
you did.
okay, can he do this? And he proved it. That tiny little fucker is sturdy as shit. I don't understand how that physically is possible, but yeah, he can last a full season in this system. Now, ask me again in 3 years if that's possible. I'm gonna, I have my doubts, but for now, yeah, he's every year there's an unquestioned number 1 overall pick, and that's him. And I think he's gonna pay benefits.
Yeah.
He is. I'm going to be fascinated now. One last question for you is, I'm in a auction draft set to start in, if I'm doing my math right, about 15 days. Do you over under, and there is no right answer, just your opinion, over under, do you think in our salary cap is $200 for the entire draft? Do you think he will go over 70?
I think somebody will pay exactly 70.
I think so too. I think he'll go for like 71, 72. I'm not going to be that person. I'm
not
going to
be a couple dollars ahead of that, but yeah, I could very much see that happening. Yeah.
God, that's crazy. That's half your value going towards one player. God.
All right. We appreciate Chauncey for sending in all of your questions. Let's get to another good friend of the program, Alfred Rowe. He sent in this question. Is Justin Jefferson still a first-round pick? So the reason that we started to pose this question is because JJ McCarthy has suffered a knee injury. They're doing surgery on it. He is out for the entire year. A lot of people were hinging on the fact that Sam Darnold may start the season, and then McCarthy will, as he gets more acclimated, maybe will start the second half of the season or like the second 3 quarters of the season, whatever it is. But doesn't seem like that's going to be the case here. So, Tad, Justin Jefferson, first-round pick, whether that's 10-man or 12-man or anything else, does that affect any reasoning as to why Justin Jefferson will not go in the first round or will go in the first round?
6, 8, 10, 12, I don't care. Yes. He is still a first-round pick. And let me tell you why. Because you look at the disaster that was the Minnesota Vikings quarterback situation last year, he still averaged 16 yards a catch last year and had I shouldn't say over. He had exactly 100 targets over 10 games. He missed 7 games and he still had 100 targets last year. This guy is such a focal point of the offense. You could put me in at quarterback and he will still find a way to produce, even though I would probably last about maybe half a quarter if I'm lucky. God, I hope that offensive line would hold up. Point being is, yes, he's such a key part of this offense. There's just no way he doesn't produce. Sam Darnold, we brought this up last episode. He does have that stink of the Jets still following him around, but I think he actually has a solid redemption arc to play out this season. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying there's a solid shot at, it actually happening. So yes, Justin Jefferson, 100% worth a first round pick as well.
First round pick, yes. Top 5 pick, I don't think so. That's the thing that sort of separates it for me. So it's like, if you're in a first round, whether it's a 10-person league, 12-person league, whatever it is, he's 100% going to go in the first round. But if you're in that top 5 and he's available, that's why I really question things. Because if you look at the top 5, I can see Christian McCaffrey going there, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall. I think Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb will fill out that top 5.
All right. All right. Hold on. I'm going to put you on the spot here because of all the players you just named, which is fair. I agree with all those names you just listed. Only 2 of them are receivers. Name 3 more receivers you'd take above him. So you said Tyreek Hill.
Brown.
We're going to get into that, but okay.
I prefer him over Justin Jefferson. Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown.
Wilson's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Sorry, who was the last one?
AJ Brown.
Okay, I put him and AJ Brown on the same tier right now.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
AJ Brown doesn't get as much traffic as you think.
I still think Jalen Hurts prefers AJ Brown over Devontae Smith.
He 100% does. It's just the question is, are you going to throw it to AJ Brown or are you going to fucking QB rush it in for another bullshit touchdown?
Well, it doesn't matter what. That's what
it absolutely does when it comes to fantasy football. It matters.
Like on those deep passes, he's looking for AJ Brown more. So that's why I side a little bit more with Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown over Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold. Now, I will say that I still like Justin Jefferson in the first round because, like you said, even with the pitiful, situation that we saw with Minnesota after Kirk Cousins got hurt,
Dobbs literally sent him to the hospital.
He did. Nick Mullins came for the Minnesota Vikings as well, but Nick Mullins played in 4 games with the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson averaged 22.1 fantasy points per game with Nick Mullins under quarterback, under center for them. And so this is very reminiscent of a situation that we saw with the Texans before, where it's like Andre Johnson got the best out of every situation with all the terrible quarterbacks that he played with. DeAndre Hopkins got the best out of every situation with all the terrible quarterbacks that he played with as well. So I see Justin Jefferson falling into that category. That's like, it really doesn't matter who's under center. He is going to get his because he has just found a way to just sort of find openings, get separation, score a lot of points. Just that is him. As long as he stays healthy. Unfortunately, he got hurt last year. If he is healthy, he is still at every single worth a first-round pick for sure. But just, yeah, that top 5 for me, that's where I'm a little bit questioning things. So outside of the top 5, that's where I draft him.
Nick Mullins at what college?
Southern Mississippi.
Damn it!
Yeah, that one I know because that was the same school that Brett Favre went to, and that was a big thing when he was the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. So that's why I knew that.
It's Favre.
Oh gosh, but yeah, I still think 100% we're both in agreement here. Justin Jefferson, first round pick. As far as like whether top 5 or outside of that, that's where we sort of differ a little bit there. But we appreciate the question there, Al. But speaking of Justin Jefferson, let's transition here to our good friend Jay Boyd because he gets specific. He is very specific. He needs actual advice for his league here. So thoughts on Justin Jefferson if he falls to 6th overall? He's in a 10-man league with half PPR. So I kind of already gave my answer that even outside of the top 10, I'm a little bit like I would go for it here at number 6 overall. If he was inside the top 10, like a top 5, excuse me, that's where I'd sort of question things a little bit. But if he's at 6 overall, I'm pulling the trigger for sure.
Yeah, so am I. And like I said, I'll share a stat I already shared where, in 10 games, he had 100 targets, meaning that he would get close to 200 had he played the entire season, had Josh Dobbs not sent him to the hospital. So point being is, again, I'm basically just repeating myself at this point. He's a focal point of this offense to such a degree that, yeah, especially half PPR. Oh my God. If it's full PPR, you take that man immediately.
Yes.
Where not only does he get all these, these receptions to rack up those points, but he is the rare non-slot receiver who will get this type of attention and can turn it into production. He's not, and look, I know he was productive, but he's not stop giving me that look.
I always have to give you that look because I don't know where you're going.
No, that's very fair. That's actually very fair. That's a well-earned look looking back on it. Wes Welker, given the amount of receptions he had in his career, should have been more productive. There's a reason Wes Welker is not yet a Hall of Famer, even though he absolutely should be. Crazy stat, by the way, Wes Welker never won a Super Bowl.
Wow, he was on those teams that lost to the Giants, was he?
He was on the Patriots team, and here's the worst part: he was on the Broncos team that lost to the Seahawks.
To the Seahawks in that disaster. Wow, that does suck.
Never won a Super Bowl.
That's a good stat. That's a good one.
Yeah. Damn, I should say that for a later episode. But anyway, point being is Welker, given the amount of receptions he had, never produces many touchdowns, yards. Jefferson is the opposite of that, where he gets all the targets and produces them. So, 6 overall, 10-man league, half PPR. I'm taking him over St. Brown. Trader.
Yeah, you also look at the aspect where it's like TJ Hawkinson's going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list. You got Jordan Addison dealing with an ankle injury. He's supposed to be good by week.
Osborne's gone.
That could linger for throughout the rest of the season. Plus, he's dealing with this off the season stuff, so who knows whether he's going to get suspended or not. So, with that, like de facto, Justin Jefferson is going to be throwing the ball a lot in that offense. So 100% at 6, I would pull the trigger there on Justin Jefferson. So let's get to the next question here. This is actually pretty interesting here, Tad. So do you prefer using ADP or do you prefer using tiers with your draft plans? I'm curious on your answer here.
So I need a little bit of clarification here because I'm pretty sure I know what this question means, but I purposely did not tell you about this before the episode so we could clarify for our audience as well. Essentially, the way I see it is, am I going off of what people are doing based off my own rankings? Am I reading that right?
So let me clarify for you.
Yes, please.
So ADP stands for average draft position. So it's like it gives you a sort of summary as far as like where these players are being drafted based on the platform that you're playing in, whatever it is. So that sort of gives you an idea as far as where the players are being drafted. Tiers is where it separates it by first tier as far as like these are guys that you want to target, obviously first. Okay. These are guys that you want to target second. These are guys that you want to target third. And so with me, my answer here is I want a hybrid of both. So I use tiers when it comes to positional value. So it's like these are guys that's like, okay, these are guys that I'm targeting first. Then it's these sets of guys, then these sets of guys. But then where I value ADP is now where I'm thinking about position in a draft. So it's like, okay, what do I want to value here? Do I want to go for a higher price do I want to get a higher price running back or a higher price receiver at, the second round here? So like, that's where I value ADP more. So I use a semblance of both to give me a good idea as far as like what positional value is better for where I'm picking. But then as far as which player from said position, then that's where I use tiers. Then I was like, okay, I value these guys more than these guys. So I use a combination of both.
Okay, so I was correct. It's basically like where these guys are going compared to tiers where I think these guys should go. And look, let's pull an example from earlier. I'm kind of with you. It's a mix of both, right? It's like I'll have Davante Adams in my tier 2, but I'm expecting having, most people having him in their tier 1. Mm-hmm. But exactly, I think that combo of both, and yeah, it's a little extra work, but it's super valuable. So honestly, and I brought this up, and we're at the 54-minute mark. Okay, hopefully none of my friends are listening at this point. Davante Adams is going to be my first nomination in my auction draft this year, because I always nominate a guy I think people will overpay for. And the reason I bring that up is because that's kind of the answer, is who's a guy that you think other people are going to overvalue? Where do they have a tier 1 guy that's in your tier 2, but that ADP kind of matches up with that overvaluation? So it's a tricky mix of both. And if you need help with that, hit us up on Instagram, hit us up on Twitter. You can see the socials right below. Oh my God, that's what it feels like when you hit the timing. That's awesome. Because yes, it's a very tricky game to play, and it's hard to get a hold of, especially if you're a beginner. But if you can find a good combination of both, yes. But if I was forced to choose one, I prefer ADP, because I like more of like, what are other people thinking? Then what am I thinking?
For sure. That makes sense. All right, let's get to the last question that Jay has for us. And once again, getting super specific with his league.
This is wild.
Yeah. So my league likes to take defenses around the 10th round or so. So very early. And I think his standard roster size, he didn't provide it for us, but I'm pretty sure it's standard roster size about maybe 16, 17 players for the full roster of both starters and bench there. So his question to us is, should I wait to take my defense at the end, so towards the final 2 picks of the draft, or since I know when these guys are taking their defenses, I can sort of join the sheep there or jump ahead of them to take a defense that I like? And so what do you think here? We've discussed defenses in the past.
My God,
ranking episodes, but it's like, what's your answer?
There's no such thing as dumb question, but like, don't give in to the peer pressure, because I understand this is probably peer pressure of like, oh my God, all these other teams.
It's a domino effect,
exactly. It's what we talked about when there's a rush on players, where it's like, oh my God, the first good quarterback went. And usually there's a rush on quarterbacks. It's like, oh my God, don't fall for the trap. There's zero reason to take a defense that early. Zero. Because let's assume it is the best defense in fantasy football, right? They score you 10 points that week, 10 points that week, 10 points that week. All of a sudden you're in week 6 and you got to drop them.
Yeah.
Like they're I don't care how good I've been playing fantasy football for nearly 16 years now. I'm old. But anyway, point being is, you didn't have to nod your head in agreement there.
But it's true.
I hate you. So point being is,
makes you feel better. I'm older.
It does actually make me feel a little better. There is no defense worth drafting that early, because eventually you're going to have to drop them unless you're willing to drop that week. And even if there is a defense that good, they're not going to stay that good. There's no team that has a schedule so friendly that they're going to keep producing on a consistent basis. It's football. This defense is going to get you negative points eventually. Defense is a streaming exclusive position. Absolutely not. I actually would argue it's better to draft a kicker before you draft a defense.
That's actually not a bad strategy. I would agree with that. But yeah, just a few numbers to sort of back up the claim that's like, you don't need to take your defense early. In the last 5 years, no defense has repeated as the number 1 fantasy defense ever in that 5-year span. The Bills and the Cowboys are the only 2 defenses that have finished in the top 5 for 3 consecutive years.
Don't draft the Bills defense. Don't do it.
The Bills defense is a little bit questionable. The Cowboys defense losing Dan Quinn, they're a little bit questionable this year as well.
Micah Parsons is
overall, though, it's just, you can't rely on just defenses being consistently good. Players leave through free agency, trades happen, rookies could come in, maybe don't fill the bill as well. So it's just like, don't worry, draft your defense at the end. You can even, like, depending on the league in there that you're in, you sometimes don't even have to draft defense. You can pick one off the waiver wire later too, and pick an extra bench player. So yeah, do not fall in line with what everybody else is doing. Stick to your strategies and fill out the rest of your roster. Grab your defense at the end. You'll be just fine. So
yeah, no, trust me. If you draft a flex option receiver compared to the guy that just got his starting defense in the 10th round, you are going to be more likely better off.
All right. So let's get to our final question of today's episode here. It comes from the big boss man of LAFB Network, Ryan Dyrud. Of course, it fills in right with LAFB Network as well. So his question to us, Tad, will Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua finish with more fantasy points?
There's a giant asterisk with this. Asterisk?
Asterisk,
right?
yeah.
Or whatever. Kupp, if he can stay healthy. Because I think a big reason why Nacua blew up so much last year, which, by the way, holy shit, that may be the most out of nowhere receiver or like not even just receiver rookie performance I've ever seen in my life. Is look, we're the draft guys. I knew of Nacua. I knew nothing of.
I did not expect him to blow up the way they did. I thought it'd be a little bit more of a slow burn and eventually he'd get good. But right out the gate, that was sensational.
Like, that was
sensational.
But I think a big reason for that blow up was he had no competition for targets. Kupp was constantly in and out last season. I think that they're both going to be good receivers. It wouldn't shock me if they both finish among the top tier fantasy receivers because that offense is going to be crazy. And plus, that defense has a lot of holes in it, so they're going to need to pass a lot to stay competitive, which I think they will be. But bottom line being is I think if Kupp can stay on the field, he's just so ingrained in the culture of that team and ingrained in that culture of the offense that they're going to look his way. And I think it's going to turn out like this, that I think that Kupp is going to be the receptions and the yards guy, and Nacua is going to end up being the touchdown guy. That's how I see it shaking out.
Interesting. So I still think Nacua is going to finish higher, even though Cooper Kupp has that sort of chemistry with Matthew Stafford. But I 100% agree with you that both of these receivers are going to finish in the top 20. Like I see Nacua probably being the guy that'll finish in the top 10, but Cooper Kupp, as long as he stays healthy, and same thing with Matthew Stafford, I think they'll just pick up where they left off from the 2021 season where Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown. Rams obviously won the Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford, I think, was a fringe top 10 fantasy quarterback, if I remember correctly, too. Like probably in the top 10.
I don't think he was fringe. Yeah, I was about to say, I think
he was in the top 10. Yeah. So, but just like, I think they'll pick up where they left off from that season. So it's like, we could see a very similar situation where we saw the Bengals with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Like that's going to happen here with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Like I think both guys are going to find a lot of success. But I think for me, I think Nacua will finish with a few more points because he'll be more of the touchdown scorer compared to Cooper Kupp in my eyes there. So, but yeah, if you're drafting either Rams receiver, if you find yourself in a situation where you can get both, then it's like, yeah, go for it. Pull the trigger and get both of them.
Hey, I came out anti-handcuff, but like that's another good handcuff where I'm like, no, that tracks.
That's what to get.
Wow,
That's
both LA teams, my two handcuff options.
Yeah, exactly. So we appreciate everybody that sent in a question. And I mean, we brought this up at the beginning of the episode too, guys, but I mean, once the season begins, like that doesn't mean the questions have to stop. So please interact with us. Send us your questions. Like we saw in today's episode, we got some broad questions from our good friends like Thaddeus and Chauncey, but then we got super specific with questions from Jay, where it's just like he needed specific help for his respective fantasy league. So I mean, we could do that for you too. So it's like whatever league you're in, send us your question. We'll give you advice. You got us on our social media handles. You got me at UmpTheSide23 on Twitter. You got Tad at TadSide94. Got the show handle at The Decide Guys. And of course, we're on Instagram at The Decide Guys as well. So interact with us all season long. We've said this once. We'll say it every single time. We're here to win you some fantasy titles this year. So please interact with us. We're here to help you with that. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel wherever you'll watch your YouTube channels. And please make sure you support our parent network at LAFB Network. They're giving you a lot of great content when it comes to the Rams and the Chargers at the professional level and the Bruins and the Trojans when it comes to the college level. So lots of great content coming from all four LA football teams there. But guys, to everybody who sent us in questions, who's interacting with us on social media, who's listening to the podcast, who's watching our videos, I mean, just anything and everything that you're doing to support the podcast, we can't thank you enough.
And if you're worried, hey, I'm going to my first, season of fantasy football, or hey, I'm going into the season of fantasy football, I can't finish last again. Don't worry, because we're not stopping coverage once the season starts. In fact, we're ramping it up every Monday night, or I guess Tuesday morning. Sorry, I got to remember. Yeah, Tuesday morning, we're dropping
We recorded Monday night, so you're
we
not.
We do. That's the confusion. Every Tuesday morning, we're dropping our waiver wire pickup episode. Every Wednesday night or Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, we're still trying to decide. We're dropping our Stardom Sim episode. And then on top of that, if fantasy football isn't your thing, don't worry, because we're dropping YouTube shorts, courtesy of our partners at Underdog Fantasy, of the best bets to make that weekend. So if you're not a fantasy guy and you're like, okay, this isn't for me, we still have material for you. So that is all coming. It sounds crazy to say, just about 2 weeks away. So we are, we're sneaking up on the start of the season. So trust us, the fantasy coverage is going to go all season long. And in case you disagree with anything we say, if you want to, have a conversation with us, like Amber said, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube comments, wherever you can find us, we will interact with you guys. Because, without you, there is no us. And without, LAFB Network, there is no us as well. So be sure to check out the Reddit page as well. And yeah, guys, I'm excited for the start of the season. We're getting closer and closer as the day rolls on. And don't forget, we still have plenty of preseason, award show predictions, everything else coming your way over the next couple of weeks. So be sure to check that out. But as always, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And please stay safe.